All right, so today we're diving deep into one of those stories everyone's heard of, but maybe not really thought about deeply. Cain and Abel.
Yeah, Genesis chapter 4. It's tacked with stuff.
It really is. Drama, symbolism. We're going to tackle big questions this story brings up, like that whole "am I my brother's keeper" thing. What does that even mean, really? Especially today.
And it's amazing how much of Western culture, like the ideas we have, comes from this one chapter.
Okay, so the scene is set, right? Adam and Eve, after the Garden of Eden, they've got two sons, Cain the farmer and Abel the shepherd. Even that's interesting, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's like right away, two ways of life, settling down versus, moving around, like a mini version of what humans have always struggled with.
And then bam, offerings to God. Abel brings the firstborn lamb, best of his flock, Cain some of his harvest. And a text doesn't say Cain's offering was bad per se, but
But God liked Abel's and, well, didn't like Cain's. That's the key point. Why? The Bible doesn't say directly. And that's been argued about for centuries. Was it what they offered, their attitude? It's ambiguous, which is part of why this story is so powerful.
And Cain is not happy at all. Angry, jealous. God sees this and warns him. Sin is like a beast waiting to pounce, but you can control it. It's almost like God saying, Cain, you have a choice here.
Right, and that ties into this huge debate. Free will versus predestination. Like, is Cain going to sin no matter what? Or does he have the power to resist? The text doesn't give a simple answer, which I think makes people think harder about it.
For sure. But we know what happens. Cain kills Abel. The words the Bible uses are so simple but so chilling. Cain attacked his brother and killed him. And then that question, am I my brother's keeper? It's heavy.
Yeah, it's almost become like an excuse to ignore people who need help. But in the story, Cain's trying to avoid taking responsibility.
And God's not fooled. Abel's blood, it's like it's crying out. Cain gets cursed, exiled to wander. But he also gets this mark for protection, which is kind of weird, right?
It is punishment, but also safety. It suggests Cain still has a part to play in the story of humanity, even though he's done this awful thing.
So Cain's cursed, gone. But then he finds a wife, we don't know where from, the Bible doesn't say, and he builds a city. Not exactly wandering alone in the wilderness, huh?
And it gets even more complicated when you look at his descendants. They do all this stuff. Animal husbandry, music, metalworking. Jabal, Jubal, Tubal-Cain, these are big advancements for early humans.
Well, even though there's this curse, they're helping humanity progress. It makes you think, can good things come from bad situations? It's a question people have asked forever.
Right. And this story, it doesn't give easy answers, that's for sure.
And then there's Lamech, one of Cain's descendants. This guy brags about killing someone just for hurting him. And he twists what happened to Cain, saying if Cain's punishment was 7 times worse, his should be 77 times worse.
It's scary, right? It's not just the violence, but how he sees punishment. Like, it's something to be proud of. It's a warning about how revenge can get out of control.
It's the opposite of God protecting Cain, that's for sure.
Totally. Lamech is like the worst of human nature on display. But then there's hope.
Yes. Adam and Eve have another son,
Right.
Seth. And his name means appointed, like a fresh start after Abel.
And it's through Seth's family line that we see a different focus, more spiritual, not just the stuff Cain's descendants were doing.
And the chapter ends with this. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. That's a huge turning point, like humanity becoming aware of something bigger than themselves.
So much in one chapter. Betrayal, murder, progress, and the beginning of people seeking God.
Makes you think, like it's not just a sibling rivalry thing. It's like this mirror reflecting stuff about us, about being human and how we relate to God.
And those reflections can be, well, not always comfortable. It kind of forces you to look at the darker side of humanity, all the messed up stuff.
Not exactly a happy story.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's so powerful. It doesn't try to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah, it makes you ask, am I capable of doing something like that? Like Cain? Or can we choose to be better?
And that whole am I my brother's keeper thing, you said it's become an excuse to, like, ignore people.
Yeah.
But how does this story make us think about it differently?
Yeah.
Deeper?
Well, it's definitely not just about, like, charity or doing nice things sometimes. It's deeper. It's about seeing every person, even those who are different, even those who've hurt us, as worthy, as important.
So it's not just actions, but how we see the world, how we see other people.
Exactly. It's about empathy, understanding, feeling connected to other people. Like, how can I make the world a place where everyone feels like they belong, like they matter?
Wow. It's crazy how a story this old can still be so relevant today. It's like betrayal, justice, wanting to connect. It's all part of being human.
And not just personal stuff either. Look at what's happening in the world, all the conflict, inequality, people taking advantage of others. Are we really taking care of each other as a society, like the story says we should?
It's a tough question. But, yeah, we got to ask it. And speaking of how relevant this is, it's amazing how Cain and Abel pops up everywhere in our culture.
Yeah.
It's not just a religious story anymore. It's like this big, important symbol.
You see it in art, books, music, psychology even. There's even something called the Cain complex. It's about, like, rivalry between siblings, especially brothers.
Wait, hold on. For those of us who aren't, like, shrinks, what does that Cain complex thingy mean?
Oh, sure. It's the idea that, like, jealousy and competition between siblings can really affect them, how they grow up, their relationships. It's not an official diagnosis, but it helps us understand what goes on between brothers and sisters sometimes.
So even if someone's never read the Bible, they've probably seen some version of Cain and Abel somewhere.
Exactly. Think about all those paintings, sculptures of Abel being killed, or books and plays about guilt, betrayal, the consequences of violence. It all comes from this one story.
It's mind-blowing that something this old is still so powerful.
That's the power of myth, right? It gets at something universal about being human, our fears and desires, and that never changes no matter what time period or culture.
But the thing is, the story's simple, but the interpretations, they're all over the place. It's like every generation, every scholar, every person sees something different in it.
And that's what's so cool about it. There's no one right answer. Different religions, different philosophies, even your own life experiences, it all affects how you see this story.
So, like, what are some of the big debates people have had about Cain and Abel?
One of the biggest is, like, what was Cain's sin, really? Was it just being jealous that God liked Abel's offering better? Or was it something worse, something in Cain himself? Some people say it was his anger, his resentment. Others say it was his pride, thinking he was better than Abel.
And what about God? Why did he choose Abel's offering? Was it random? Or was there a reason?
Yeah, that's another biggie. Some say it was a test for Cain to see how he'd react. Others say Abel was just more sincere, that his offering was what God wanted. And some even say it's about the tension between different lifestyles, the farmer versus the shepherd.
Wow, so many different ways to look at it.
That's what makes it so valuable. It makes us think about tough questions, things that don't have easy answers, and that's important.
It definitely sticks with you, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what makes great literature, whether it's ancient or modern. It makes you think, it challenges you, it makes you see the world in a new way.
Speaking of challenging, that question, am I my brother's keeper? Keeps coming back to me. We talked about how it's more than just charity, but, like, how do we actually do that today? In the real world, in the 21st century, what does it look like?
You're right. It's tough to figure out. The story tells us what we should do, but how to actually do it, that's up to each of us.
It's easy to get overwhelmed, right? With all the problems in the world, injustice, all that stuff, anything I do feels so small.
That's where the story's wisdom comes in, I think. It's not saying we got to solve everything. It's about changing how we think first.
So instead of freaking out about everything, what's a better way to think about being my brother's keeper today?
I'd say start with who you have influence over. Your family, friends, people you work with. Are you kind to them? Do you try to understand them, really see them?
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in life and forget about the people who matter most.
Yeah, and it goes from there. Your community, things you care about, even how you act online, all those places are where you can be a keeper.
So not big showy things, but everyday choices, small things that add up.
Right. It could be buying things that are made ethically, speaking up when you see prejudice, even just listening to someone who's having a hard time.
And those things, they might seem small, but together they make the world better.
That's the cool part. It's not about being perfect. It's about trying.
Yeah.
It's about paying attention, asking yourself, how am I making people feel cared for, supported? How am I making a difference?
Like a journey, huh? Always trying to be better.
Yep. And it's a journey we're all on together as individuals, communities, the whole world. We're all connected.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot. Personal responsibility, society, psychology. But what about God? We talked about free will versus predestination. But what other big questions does this story make us ask about our relationship with God?
Oh, good point. It's not just about people. It's about us and God. It makes us ask really deep questions about God, evil, suffering, all that.
Like, if God knows everything and can do anything, why did he let Cain kill Abel? Why didn't he stop it?
Man, theologians have been trying to figure that out for centuries. Some say that even though God knew what Cain would do, he didn't make him do it. That's free will, right?
Yeah, that whole debate again.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Others say that we can't understand God's ways, that his ideas of justice and mercy are just beyond us.
It's a story that makes you realize how much you don't know.
And it makes you think about faith, how there are some things we'll just never fully understand.
Okay, so free will, God's justice, why bad things happen. What else? Theologically speaking, I mean.
Well, there's forgiveness and redemption. Cain is cursed, but God also protects him. Is that mercy? Even though Cain did something horrible.
That's interesting. It's like, even after messing up really badly, there's still a chance to be forgiven.
Yeah. And it makes you think, can we do that too? Forgive people who've hurt us, not because they deserve it, but because holding on to anger hurts us more in the end.
That's tough, especially when someone's really hurt you.
For sure. But the story, it makes us at least think about forgiveness for ourselves and for others.
It's like this one story is about everything. All the important stuff about being human and our relationship with God.
And that's why it's so powerful. It gets at our deepest needs, our desire for connection, meaning understanding our place in the world.
You know, we've gone through a lot, but that question, am I my brother's keeper? It's still bugging me. We get the idea deeper than just doing good deeds, but what's it really mean now? Like in the world today?
It is the big challenge, isn't it? Story gives us the idea, the moral part, but figuring out how to live it, that's on each of us.
Right. It's easy to get overwhelmed, like global problems, unfair systems. Feels like anything I do is just a tiny, tiny thing.
And that's where the story, it helps, I think. It's not saying one person's got to fix everything. It's about, first, how you think.
So instead of freaking out because it's all so huge, what's a better way to be my brother's keeper now?
I'd say think about the people you actually affect. Starting close, right?
No.
Family, friends, folks at work. Are you being good to them? Really getting them, being empathetic?
That's true. Easy to get busy and forget to, really be there for the people right in front of you.
And from there, it spreads out. Your town, causes you care about, even online, how you act. All those places, that keeper idea matters.
So not gonna be some hero, but just in everyday stuff, making good choices, that adds up.
Exactly. Buying stuff that's made fairly, calling out prejudice when you see it, even just listening to someone who's down. Those things matter.
Yeah, by themselves, they're small, but all together, they make things better.
That's what's so hopeful. Not about being perfect, but the effort you put in. Paying attention, asking, what am I doing that helps people feel cared for, helped? How am I making a difference?
A journey, right? Always working on it.
Totally. And we're all on that journey, individually, in groups, the whole world. Can't get away from being connected, for good or bad.
You mentioned that Cain complex from psychology before. Made me think, does the story say anything about fixing those bad feelings, the jealousy, competition? Because let's face it, everybody's felt that, with siblings, friends, even people at work.
Such a sharp observation. The story itself doesn't give, instructions on how to stop fighting, but it does show some important stuff. Well, first, how dangerous it is to just let anger and bitterness eat at you. That's what Cain does, and it leads to violence. So, being your brother's keeper also means taking care of your own feelings, finding good ways to deal with them.
So don't keep it all inside or let anger take over. Find healthy ways to let it out, talk to someone, write it down, even get professional help maybe.
Right. And the second thing, the story shows how important communication is, even when it's tough. God tries to talk to Cain, warn him. Imagine if Cain had said how he felt, asked for help, instead of just snapping.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what if they could have talked it out? Would things have been different?
Who knows? We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. We can try to be better at talking openly, listening to each other, trying to understand.
Okay, so individual stuff, society, psychology. But let's go back to the God part for a minute. You said something about forgiveness, redemption. Does the story give any hope for people who messed up, made bad choices? Because we all do that, right?
Yeah, that's where it gets really powerful, I think. Cain does something terrible, but God doesn't totally abandon him, gives him that protection mark. Even though he's exiled, he's not totally cut off from God.
Even when we're at our worst, feeling lost and bad about ourselves, there's still a chance to make things right.
Exactly. And it makes us think, can we be forgiving like that too? To people who've hurt us, not because they earned it, but because holding on to anger only hurts us more.
Man, that's hard. Especially when someone's really hurt you bad.
It is. But the story, it asks us to at least try to forgive, both ourselves and others.
This one story, it's like It's about everything, all the big stuff about being human and what it means to have faith.
That's what makes it so timeless. It's about the deep stuff, our need to connect, to find meaning, to figure out where we fit in.
Well, we've covered a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully you listening, this has given you some things to think about. A look back at history, some big questions about life and faith, and maybe even made you think about your own place in the world.
And the best part is, this is just the start. Cain and Abel, it opens up so much more. Keep looking into it, asking questions, wrestling with these big ideas about what it means to be human.
Yeah, if this deep dive got you interested, go read Genesis chapter 4 for yourself.
Yeah.
See what jumps out at you, how it connects to your life, your beliefs, how you see the world.
And don't stop there. Look up different interpretations, talk to people who think differently. See how this story connects to other stories, myths, art. The more you dig, the more amazing it gets.
And maybe the biggest question as you go from here is this. Cain's kids, they did good things for humanity, even though their ancestor did something so awful. What's that tell us about our own WN flaws and the good we can still do? Can we, like them, make beautiful things, make progress, even while carrying the burden of our past mistakes? That's something I'm going to keep thinking about long after we're done here.